It's 8th May 2023. At Naga World 2 Olympia Mall, Cambodia, the 32nd Southeast Asian Games for Valorant commenced. Team Singapore and Team Indonesia were two of the 6 countries that fielded teams to participate in the first ever Valorant event in SEA Games history. In the playoffs, Singapore took down Vietnam 2-0 and Indonesia also 2-0 the first seed. Now in the grand finals, it was between Singapore and Indonesia as to who could bring home the coveted gold medal for their country. And it was this match where everything went wrong. Occurring every 2 years, the Southeast Asian Games is a premier sporting event amongst the Southeast Asia countries. You have your traditional sports, of course, but starting from 2019, the SEA Games started their first esports division. In early 2023, it was announced that Valorant would make its debut at the 32nd SEA Games, hosted by Cambodia. Sounds pretty good, right? Well, in recent years, the SEA Games has been marred with controversies, so much so that there are whole Wikipedia articles compiling them, and the 32nd SEA Games will be no exception. Amongst various other controversies, the Valorant event would arguably see the event's biggest. Bringing you back to speed from the intro, Singapore and Indonesia had reached the grand finals of that event. Whoever was able to win the best of 3 would make their country be the first ever Valorant SEA Games gold medalist. The first map went to Singapore 13-8 pretty convincingly. The second map would bring us to split, and on the 9th round, Frey, Singapore Cypher player, used this pretty innocuous Cypher camera spot. On the 14th round, he placed his camera on this spot and it got destroyed 3 seconds into the round. By then, Singapore was up 10-4, and it was here where problems started to crop up. According to a tweet longer by Team Singapore player Styron, Singapore was approached by TOs after their 10th point. Apparently, the Indonesian team had complained that Singapore had used a quote bugged camera spot and demanded a replay of the 14th round, referring to this spot here. Singapore, though a bit confused as according to Styron, the spot was quote a very commonly used camera and it's legal in certain VCTs, they still agreed to replay the round. 30 minutes later, another complaint was lodged against Team Singapore, this time being about the camera placed in the 9th round. However, Styron claimed that the camera they used in the 9th round did not break any of the rules stated in the rulebook, which read that as long as the camera is viewable and able to be destroyed by both teams, it is legal. Moreover, the severity of the penalty depended on how much of an impact the bug had in the round. But not only did the camera almost immediately get broken, Indonesia subsequently won the round. But wait, if the bugged camera spot wasn't in the rulebook, how did Team Indonesia know that that spot was banned? Well, Team Indonesia's coach would post Discord DMs of him conversing with the TOs discussing which camera spots could be or couldn't be placed at. Simple enough, right? The thing is, Team Singapore weren't even in this discussion in the first place as it took place on a private server. From the point of view of the Singapore players, they were using camera spots that were legal in the circuit they played, could be and was destroyed by the other team, and was not even aware that that spot in particular was illegal as it was in a private Discord DM with the Indonesian coaches. The TOs deliberated for nearly 6 hours, which is frankly insane to take that long to make a decision. At 12:51 AM, the final decision was made by the tournament organizers. The match would be replayed from 9 to 4. Team Singapore agreed, and the rest of the tournament was waiting for Team Indonesia to get back into the lobby to play the rest of the game. 10 minutes pass, 20 minutes pass, 30 minutes pass, 40 minutes pass, and Team Indonesia still hadn't showed up. An hour later, Indonesia was still nowhere to be seen. Instead, according to Styron, a crowd started to show up at the arena, presumably Indonesian fans, shouting and protesting for another decision to be made. So, Team Singapore was told by the TOs to wait for another 2 hours to make another quote final decision. At 4 AM, it was decided that the game would be played from a scoreline of 5-5, with Indonesia getting 2 points for the bug that Singapore used. Team Singapore was to come back to the stage by 8 AM to replay the match, which they agreed to. By 8 AM, Singapore had reached the venue and were all set up and ready to finally play the map. However, 50 minutes later, Singapore will be informed that Indonesia had forfeited the map in protest of the decision. It turned out that Indonesia wanted to either disqualify Singapore entirely or forfeit the second map to Indonesia. Presumably, the TOs refused, and Indonesia forfeited in protest, saying that it was a matter of quote, national pride, thereby Singapore winning gold by default. But that didn't mean Indonesia was done protesting, as they kept it up to the point that it apparently delayed the award ceremony. Finally, after waiting another 2 hours for the award ceremony to start, it was announced that both Indonesia and Singapore would get the gold medal. According to Styron, Singapore could either dispute the joint gold medal decision, which would take a full week for some reason, or just accept the joint gold. Considering the fact that Singapore was expected to wrap up their match on the day of the finals and be on a flight home the very next day, they would have to miss their flight and be stuck in Cambodia for another week if they want to dispute the joint gold. So in the end, Singapore just accepted the decision, and seeing as they were already behind schedule for their flight, left a single representative to tearfully accept the medal. Styron would later tweet out saying, "We read the rules, we obeyed every TO decision to roll back or play on, we waited and we are still labelled cheaters. What a way to take away every honour the medal carries." The Esports Federation of Indonesia, who apparently were the ones who staged the initial protest, considered this act as equivalent to, quote, digital doping. They will go on to say that it goes against both the technical handbook and the rules mutually agreed upon at the technical meeting. A possibility as to why Indonesia was basically able to kind of strong-arm the SEA Games TOs to abide by their decision was likely because of the lack of support on the Singapore side. Indonesia apparently had around 15 members of their committee to protest, while Singapore only had 3 female handlers on their side. Okay, I'm gonna curb my Singapore bias a bit and try to look at things from the Indonesian team's perspective. Team Indonesia are well within their right to complain about the bug. Whether intentional or not, I feel like it was reasonable for Team Indonesia to lodge that complaint. To be fair, the Indonesian team apparently had complained to the admins about this earlier, but the admins allegedly just straight up ignored them until the 10-4 tech pause, hence why the round 9th camera was brought up yet again. However, I feel like the Indonesians just straight up refusing the 5-5 rollback after hours of waiting, demanding Singapore to be disqualified, only for them to forfeit themselves to, quote, uphold national dignity, is straight up absurd in my opinion. Apparently, the Indonesian players agreed to the rollback, but it seemed like the higher ups were the ones that were doing all the protesting. And if that's the case, no hate to the players. And I mean, considering the fact that the Secretary General of the Indonesian Esports Central Board had threatened to ban Indonesian players who refused to play in this very SEA Games, and the ones who were responsible for staging the protests cited the 1945 Indonesian Constitution, which emphasized that defending the country is a constitutional right and obligation of Indonesian citizens. Like, okay, surely it can't be that deep, right? The Singapore players also got a lot of threats in their DMs about this whole saga, which, I mean, yeah, I'd be more surprised if it didn't happen, considering how stupid this whole event was. In conclusion, I do think the Singaporeans were unfairly being dogpiled on by the Indonesian team and fans, but ultimately, I really feel like the blame lies on the tournament organizers. Basic communication of rules weren't established between teams, which was the responsibility of the organizers. The players were the ultimate victim in all of this, both Singaporean and Indonesian in my opinion. Like I said, it seemed like the Indonesian players were victim themselves of the Indonesian higher-ups decisions, but I can't 100% verify the claims. Anyway, with SEA Games 2025 on the horizon, and with it seeming like esports is coming back, let's hope this disaster doesn't happen again.